Hi everyone, thanks so much for joining me for this talk. Please consider it as less of a presentation and more as just a feel-good meditation on creativity and how to get back to basics and get back to that wonderful flow state. So to start us off, what is flow? For anyone who is not familiar with the term, I believe flow is something that we've all experienced throughout our lives, particularly when we were kids. Flow is simply being super immersed in an activity to the point where you lose track of time. I think when we were kids, we probably lost ourselves in activities such as learning a new card trick or figuring out how to do a new trick with your yo-yo. It's the sweet and simple things. And so I do feel like there's a direct connection between flow and childhood, because that was when we were not afraid to learn new things and to experiment and to just, run around the world and do a bunch of things without even questioning whether or not we can do them or if, we're capable of it. And so the magical thing about flow is when you do experience it, it leaves you feeling so energetic and so upbeat and so uplifted. It makes you feel like you can do anything. And of course, it makes you feel that much more creative and that much more alive. So flow is a wonderful state to be in. I think it's the ideal state for anyone who's creative. And the thing about creativity is I think some people like to box people in or box people out by using the term creative with like a capital C and saying like, oh, you can only be creative if you're a writer or if you're a poet or an artist. But I think creativity is more of a lifestyle. Creativity is choosing to be strategic or choosing to deviate from the norm because you want to try something interesting or something new. So I think creativity is for all of us. And there is a value in choosing to be creative because it enriches our lives and our experiences and what we can do for one another. So that said, flow is important, creativity is important, and yet the older we get, I feel like the more we encounter feelings of doubt or feelings like we can't be creative anymore. So what can we do about this? I believe that mindfulness is the bridge between creativity and flow. And mindfulness is just simply checking in with yourself, taking 1 minute to step back from everyone and everything that you're working on, and choosing to ask yourself the really simple questions like, hey, how am I feeling today? Is something bothering me? Is my neck cramping from sitting down and staring at the computer all day? It's these very simple questions that I think sometimes we overlook and we don't care to think about because we're too busy paying attention to Facebook status updates or paying attention to all those meeting invites that we get on Outlook for different, work-related events, etc. So much is happening in our lives, and technology is only making that easier for us to really get lost in all of that. So what I've told my coworkers is I think a lot of times it's like we forget to disconnect from the rest of the world so that we can reconnect with our inner selves. And so mindfulness is just a way to frame all of this and to say we need to build in time to do this exact thing, to just check in with ourselves. So I know you're probably thinking, I'm just too busy for this. And I'm not saying take 30 minutes out of your day. If you feel like that's too much, literally just check in with yourself right before lunch or while you're, getting your coffee or driving in your car, whatever it is, take a few moments out of your day just to take a breather and to really check in with yourself. Because I think what happens is if we choose to not be mindful, we start to see strains, whether it's in the quality of the work that we produce or in the quality of the relationships that we have with our loved ones and with our coworkers. So all in all, I really do encourage you to just buy yourself a little bit of time to take it easy and to, again, disconnect to reconnect with your inner self and with your inner creative to get back that flow and to build in that space to be a little bit more mindful and a little bit more creative. And if you're wondering how to do all of this, it really just starts with breathing. It starts here. It starts with taking a breath and just saying, I'm going to go back to basics now, breathing in and out. And when we were kids, it was really that simple. On a subconscious level, it went something like this. Breathing in, I'm dreaming. Breathing out, I'm giving. Breathing in, I'm dreaming, I'm thinking. Breathing out, I'm sharing. Breathing in, I'm thinking, I'm dreaming. At the end of the day, we are all creatives. We're doers, we're makers, and we're tinkerers, not just thinkers. We play around with the different ideas in our minds. And if we really give ourselves the opportunity to just think big and to dream big, we can really explore the garden of ideas in our minds. And when we do this, this allows us to really give our gifts to the world, to reach our full potential as human beings and as society at large. As Jennifer O'Toole put it, differently wired brains mean differently wonderful tomorrows. And I just find that to be a really beautiful and empowering quote. That said, if you're feeling like this whole presentation and talk so far has been a little too feel good, a little too rainbows and butterflies, here is a very sobering statistic. It was from a global creative gap report done by Adobe. It says, only 1 in 4 people believe they are living up to their creative potential. So clearly there's a tension here between these two quotes of us wanting to believe that, we're all creative, that we can all use our gifts to better ourselves and to better the world. And yet only 1 in 4 people are actually being creative and really giving those creative gifts to the world. So another way to think about this is this quote right here. It's also from the same study, and it says, people spend only 25% of their time being creative at work. So of course, if we have 9 to 5s, we're clearly doing something at work. We're definitely not just sitting there doing nothing. Instead, I believe as a society and as a culture, we've chosen productivity over creativity. Which means that on an internal level, we've gone from saying, breathing in, I'm dreaming, breathing out, I'm giving, I'm sharing all my fun, creative thoughts, to this feeling instead of breathing in, I'm thinking, breathing out, I'm producing. I'm just jamming away, I'm crunching the numbers, I've lost myself in this. Which means breathing in, I really miss creating. So another way to think about this is that process of ideating and coming up with one idea and seeing where that idea goes. I feel like sometimes what happens is you have one spiral of an idea that you're super inspired by, but then the moment you tell someone, all of a sudden, one voice chimes in and is like, I don't know if that idea is good. And then another voice chimes in, or your own internal, monologue inside your mind is like, oh yeah, I think that person's right. And then, what this adds up to is just this huge cloud of confusion, to the point where there is not even like a name or a label for it, but you're just stuck with all these negative feelings. And you're like, I guess that idea wasn't really good. I guess I'm not very creative, or I guess I wasn't on the mark. So all in all, again, it's just this huge cloud of doubt and negativity and discouragement. So my question to all of you guys is, do you think this choice to choose productivity over creativity is working? And you don't really have to answer, just think about it for a second. But if suddenly this is all too depressing, let's just say we have a bit of hope. Let's look at this word right here, FICA. So what is FICA? FICA is what the Swedes like to call coffee. Or to be more specific, it's a coffee break. It's a time in the middle of the afternoon when you can just step away from all your work, check in with your colleagues, or just check in with yourself, and give yourself a break. So right now, Swedish companies are experimenting with shorter 6-hour workdays and also making FICA coffee breaks mandatory. And if you're wondering if this is working or if it's all just a ploy, studies have shown that only 1% of Swedish employees work overtime right now, and they are not any less productive. So that's, again, even with these coffee breaks, even with a shorter workday, etc. So I just want to throw that out as food for thought, and to also reiterate the point that it's not about the coffee, it's about the break. It's about giving yourself that one moment, again, to be a little more mindful. It's choosing to step back, to step away from uncertainty or doubts or, having all these negative thoughts, and crossing over and moving towards the other side of certainty, of openness, of choosing to dream big. I think we've all experienced those moments where you sit and you think, I'm going to be really strategic. I need to really figure out this big task at hand, and it's going to take me a lot of time. So I'm just going to sit here and not stand up until I'm all set. But in the process of doing that, sometimes what ends up happening is we kind of beat ourselves up over and over again, and there is no solution that we can find in that moment. And yet, even when we know this, we still keep doing it. So it's kind of like that quote about saying insanity is doing the same thing 1,000 times and thinking that you're going to get a different result. Be mindful, step away, and give yourself a break. Come back, and there's probably something refreshing or something that you didn't see or think of beforehand that now you can just see so clearly. All it takes is that one moment of mindfulness. So let's say you got over that hump, and now you're like, I'm going to go out, I'm going to do great work, I'm going to be creative, and nothing and no one can stop me. Well, there's one other danger that we encounter in ourselves as well as in others, even when we're choosing to be creative. And that is simply that the statistics show that we as humans know that creativity is good, but our fear of risk or uncertainty is much greater, which means that even when we know an idea may be creative, we have the tendency to choose the safer option, which means it usually comes with mediocre results, or just something softer, something that is a little too expected, which means it's not different, it's not refreshing, it's not creative. And as a result of this, what ends up happening over time is that everything feels dull, and finally, we burn out. So what can we do to rekindle this, to get back to the flow, to get back to creativity, to re-enlighten ourselves, and to re-enrich our lives? I believe we have to go with what Van Gogh said. Normality is a paved road. It's comfortable to walk, but no flowers grow. Choose to not only plant the seeds, but to explore the garden of ideas in your minds, because I truly believe that we are all too talented and too gifted and too skilled to just settle for second best. So again, how do we get back to our flow? In terms of how do we do this on a larger scale or in the workplace, Fortune magazine says a creative work culture in the 21st century has gone from a nice to have to a must have. Encourage creative thought, develop a creative work culture and environment for your colleagues and for your teammates. And also know that having creative DNA embedded in the work culture leads to success in terms of revenue and finances, and also in terms of positive impressions with your internal and external stakeholders. If you're ever in doubt, just think of it as a win-win for all situations from all angles. But you know what? At the end of the day, don't even think about work. Just think about breathing. Again, that's just breathing in. I'm dreaming, I'm choosing to believe in my gifts. I'm breathing out, I'm choosing to give and share my gifts with the world. For anyone who's a little too type A, or anyone who just feels like, you know what, this sounds great in theory, but what about in practice? What can I do on a tactical level to really implement creativity into my life? When you talk with the experts, it's really sweet and simple. A lot of them actually point back to a really simple method that I think we can all do. It's a 2-part process, and again, it's really sweet and simple, almost too sweet and simple. Basically, what they say is instead of trying to multitask and ideate and research at the same time, split those up into 2 separate phases. Phase 1 is the absorb state. That's when you're doing all your research, taking down all your notes, really trying to look at all the data. And then step 2 is the output state. That's obviously the creative outflow state when you actually take all that data and reinterpret it and do something amazing with it. So again, this may seem a little too simplistic, but the problem is we're a little too hyper-connected to the world, and we're so good at mastering multitasking that I think we do that on default. So really, I would encourage you to give it a try the next time you're working on a big assignment. See if it makes any difference in the quality of the work that you produce. So this next slide says we need to have cognitive flexibility, which may seem really lofty or just like, wow, why are there so many big words on here? But it's really just a sweet and simple way to say we need to have an imaginative spirit. So here are some principles of creative play to get us back to that creative mode, to that creative flow state of mind. And since we're talking about creativity, imagination, and being playful, I thought it'd be more interesting to display the same principles of creative play like this. So again, these are the same words that were on the other slide, so no worries, I didn't skip too quickly, and I will read them for you. Here are the principles of creative play from a Berkeley study, but if you look online and just do a quick Google search, you'll find that a lot of experts talk about the same exact qualities and traits to champion when you're trying to be really creative. Number 1, imaginative play. Creative grit, intuition, passion, openness, thinking differently, daydreaming, mindfulness, sensitivity, and solitude. So in the interest of time, I'm not going to go through all of these, but I'm going to touch on a few that I think have interesting tidbits in terms of research I've found or just things to remind ourselves of when we're trying to be creative. Number 1 is just choosing to have grit. So what is grit? It's choosing to fail up, as one researcher put it. So failing up, what does that mean? Choosing not to give up after you've fallen down one time. Daydreaming is also incredibly important. There's a lot of new research happening, or exciting research happening around the topic of daydreaming and what's really happening in our minds when we daydream. Steve Jobs put it best when he said that creativity is simply connecting the dots. And when we daydream, this is a perfect example of how we connect the dots. Instead of thinking very linearly, daydreaming allows us to think a little bit more abstract. So we tie together things that would not normally go together. And as a result of this creative play, that's when we come up with really interesting outside-the-box ideas, and that's when we see solutions from very different angles and vantage points. So daydreaming is extremely important. But lastly, what I want to touch on is the topic of solitude. I think our culture is a culture built on extrovertedness. We're all about open collaboration, about sharing our ideas with a group, coming back to the group. The problem is, I think we encounter the issue of groupthink, where everyone's thinking the same and no one's coming up with different solutions. So we lose out on diverse thoughts or just interesting, unique thoughts and perspectives. So I think solitude is extremely important. It kind of goes back to being mindful and pulling back and checking in with yourself and saying, how do I really feel about this? As opposed to just going with groupthink and conformity. So take that moment to really check in with yourself, to kind of reassess the situation, and to decompress and to see if a different thought has come to mind. If there were one little bit of a moral principle at play here, it's just a thought that it's not about being the loudest. It's about having ideas that people want to hear. It's really important to really check in and to have that one moment. Again, breathing in, I'm choosing to take it easy, choosing to have a breather, choosing to dream, and then breathing out, choosing to give back to the world, to share a bit of myself, to share those bright ideas with the rest of the world. So here's where we take a mini break and we stop talking about meditation. So if you don't already have a piece of paper nearby, please grab a scrap sheet of paper and a pen. Now what I want you to do with that scrap sheet of paper is to draw a line in half horizontally so that you split it up so that there's a top portion and a bottom portion of the page. Then on the top part of the page, I want you to write to your younger self, or to write to your doubts and your fears, negativities, anything that's bringing you down or anything that has brought you down in the past. So top, all the negatives. Then on the bottom, I want you to write to your present self or your future self and talk about all the positives. Talk about your aspirations, talk about what's inspiring you or what is making you happy, all the bright and good things happening in your life. Again, that is top, all the negatives, bottom, all the positives. So even though I want you to invest in this, I also don't want you to feel super pressured. So please time yourself for about a minute and then come back to this. So press pause, write out your thoughts, negatives on the top, positives on the bottom. And again, take like maybe 1 or 2 minutes to do that and then press play and we'll take it from there. All right, welcome back. Thanks so much for being a good sport and for playing along. So with this note to self activity, what I want you to do now is to take a look and kind of process through your thoughts really quickly about what you wrote on top and then on the bottom. And then what I want you to do is to fold that piece of paper in half and to tear off the good from the bad. So what is the point of this part of the activity? It's really to say now you've torn away the good from the bad, keep only the good. And then with all that bad, with all the negativity, with that top half, I want you to take it and I want you to just keep ripping it. Rip it to shards, into pieces. And what we're doing on a cathartic level is we're saying, I'm figuratively kicking you out of my life. Lessons learned, I'm bigger, I'm stronger, and I'm better now. And I no longer need all these negative feelings, all these toxic, wasteful things in my life. And so why am I having us do this in this talk about creativity versus productivity? Well, we can't really be productive or creative if we have all these different things weighing us down. So it's really important to be mindful and to continuously, routinely check in with ourselves and to also remove all the excess, all the waste, all those things that no longer serve me. And don't just do it this one time in this note to self activity. Make it a routine. Make it a part of checking in with yourself. Whether it's on a daily basis or on a weekly basis, whatever works for you, just don't do it only one time. Continuously do it so that you can have a healthy, productive, amazing life that is not weighed down by any negatives. Because at the end of the day, you deserve better. So we're almost at the end of this presentation, and I just really wanted to thank you so much for being a part of this talk and for sharing your thoughts through the Note to Self activity. I created this talk with all of you in mind. I really wanted it to speak to your inner creative and to really just inspire you and all of us to be a little bit more mindful and a little bit more creative with our lives and to choose to be creative and to not settle for anything less. And at the end of the day, if anyone's still saying this is just too fluffy, too rainbows and butterflies for me, the most important thing for all of us to commit to is mindful creative excellence. Because if you're loyal to that notion, if you follow that path, you really can't go astray. So choose to fight the good fight for creative excellence. All right, so I would like to conclude by sharing this poem with all of you guys. And I know you may be thinking, oh gosh, Pim, you already forced me to think about mindfulness and meditation and breathing in and breathing out in this note to self activity. Why this poem? This poem is like an anthem. Please make it that drumbeat in your head and in your heart and in your spirit, especially when you're feeling discouraged or not creative enough. Or let's say you've just had this like soul-sucking experience where someone's completely brought you down and made you feel like you can never be creative again. Think of this poem and really find strength in it and in yourself and in your gifts. So I'm going to read it to you guys now. I really hope you take it and run with it and go out and do the great work that I know you will do. Don't do it. Unless it comes out of your soul like a rocket, unless being still would drive you to madness or suicide or murder, don't do it. Unless the sun inside you is burning your gut, don't do it. When it is truly time, and if you have been chosen, it will do it by itself, and it will keep on doing it until you die or it dies in you. There is no other way, and there never was. So go out there and do great work. Believe in yourself, be mindful, and again, commit to mindful creative excellence. So again, thanks so much for participating in this talk with me. I would love it if you left a comment about, maybe your thoughts on it or on the note to self activity. Feel free to send it and share it to anyone who you think needs a little bit of inspiration or sunshine in their lives. And yeah, thank you so much for taking a bit of your time out of your day or out of your evening to choose to believe in creative, mindful excellence. All right, bye-bye.